welcome to this community segment. And today we have the one and only Mary O'Connell here with us. And Mary, I wish you could have seen Kaylee's reaction just now when I told her my number one cookie was oatmeal raisin. She was in complete disgust, so I'm sure you two can relate on that. But thanks so much for joining us this morning. Always a pleasure to have you on.
It's always a good time. And for those who are unsure of the oatmeal cookie versus chocolate chip cookie debate, you're just going to have to show up to F3 next year, as that is where this debate was founded. So this is what this kind of things that you miss when you aren't at F3. You don't get stopped by us and pulled for your favorite cookie.
To be fair, Mary, my favorite cookie is a snickerdoodle, and I don't think anybody can top that. So I digress. Let's dig into our topic at hand today. We're talking about different types of insurance and maybe different flavors if you want to stick on the cookie theme. But everybody needs a little bit something different, right? Can you talk to us about what that looks like for different pieces of the transportation space?
Yeah, so insurance is one of those, I don't know, I like to call them the scary thing that everybody knows you need, but nobody really understands it. So today, on this episode of Check Call Today, we talked to Joe Nibley from Milepost Insurance, and he really breaks it down. So he has a lot of experience in the insurance world. He's seen basically not a lot surprises him nowadays, but we really break down the importance of insurance and why you need it, and why, going from, a reputable insurance company to Joe's House of Insurance is not always a great option. It may be cost savings, but it's going to cause more problems on the back end. So it's one of those that you really want to make sure that, you're dealing with a reputable insurance company, and then also they're covering the type of freight that you're hauling, because you don't want to be protected against, you don't want to be protected for fresh produce if you're hauling electronics. Like that's not the move.
And Mary, can you talk to some of the intricacies with insurance and how it's a different approach, say, if you're a carrier versus maybe you're a brokerage with assets? What does that all start to look like?
Yeah, so your carrier it's going to be different insurance for all of them. And typically it's a little trickier to get more of a brokerage type insurance, because there's a little bit more risk, the policies are a little bit more vague. So it gets a little trickier if you're also, if you're a carrier that is also running a brokerage, because then it becomes that becomes a little bit more muddy as to what entity is what, because you have your carrier operating as one entity, and then you have your brokerage as the other. And so if you have, you don't want to cross the insurance streams. Way less exciting than Ghostbusters, but still important philosophy. You don't want to cross that and have that interact with each other at all. You really want to make sure that you're keeping everything separate, because the last thing you want is a situation to happen and then your carrier is trying to use your broker insurance or vice versa, because that's not going to work out well for anyone. So really, there is a bunch of different types, but ultimately, your insurance provider, just tell them what you're doing and they'll be able to work out a policy that will work for you. And then, as I said before, always make sure that you're going to a reputable insurance company. Joe's House of Insurance, while they do have policies at dirt cheap, you're probably not going to be protected against 90% of what you need to be protected against.
So, Mary, a lot of the conversation right now in the 3PL space kind of revolves around broker carrier liability. We've seen some really big time court cases now come down where kind of fall on different sides of that. And then they also come down with nuclear verdicts. And a lot of people are very afraid of nuclear verdicts in this space right now. Rightly so, there are lots of money. But at the end of the day, a lot of those nuclear verdicts end up being paid out by insurance. And if you don't have that type of fleet insurance, if you are found responsible in a crash, things like that, it can very quickly bankrupt your business. Can you talk a little bit about the value of having very good, very strong fleet insurance, especially at a time where we are seeing so many nuclear verdicts come down?
Yeah, so it's something exactly like what you said. You want to make sure that you're protected, because I don't know about any other 3PL, but if someone were to hand down a verdict to me where, if there's a crash that I'm liable for and I have to pay $3 million, I can't make that appear out of thin air. Like, you can maybe make $1,000 appear, but a couple mil, that's going to be infinitely harder. And, you're going to be led down to bankruptcy, and that's not what anyone wants, all because you tried to cut cost and go to a cheaper insurance. So unfortunately, insurance is one of the higher costs item for a carrier, for a broker, for anyone in this space. Your insurance is going to be right up there with your fuel cost, but it's an important one. It's one of those where it's unfortunate that, fuel is something you use, you see, it's tangible, and insurance is, well, I need this just in case. I need it just in case something happens, because it's not a matter of if something happens, it's a matter of when something happens. So I understand that times are tight, markets are down, and it's tempting to cut costs and go with a different provider. However, I cannot stress it enough that insurance is something that you probably don't want to cut and go to a cheaper alternative that may not be as strong. If you are going to a different alternative, you want to try and get as close to the same policy as you had, that really protects you from everything, because like you said, it's that or pretty much bankruptcy.
And Mary, of course, there are different levels to this when we're looking at the carrier side. Can you talk to some of the difficulties it might be for a smaller carrier operation when we're seeing insurance costs continue to rise?
So typically, if you have a bigger carrier, it's your insurance is going to be a pretty big bill, but at the same time, your revenue is a little bit bigger. So it's easier for you to kind of absorb those policy increases or other things that you'll have. But if you're an owner operator, or maybe you have 2 to 3 trucks, your insurance is going to be expensive, and it's going to be really tempting to, and this is also something that brokers need to watch out for. And that is, if I have someone who I'm giving a very high value load to, and they have to go get a one-off insurance or something like that, they need to re-up their insurance policy. They need to send paperwork of that. They need to say that for this load, I am insured up to whatever value, because you don't want them to say, oh yeah, I got it, don't worry. And then something happened and turns out they didn't get it. And then you're left in this really sticky situation. But it only takes a couple minutes to make sure that insurance is valid. And also importantly, if you're working with a new carrier or a smaller carrier, it never hurts when you're onboarding them to verify their insurance. And, it's not uncommon. It should be a normal practice that when you're onboarding a new carrier, you call their insurance company just to verify that they're a customer, because there is a lot of insurance fraud going around as well. So it's one of those where everyone has to kind of be a little bit more hyper vigilant, because you never know when someone's going to downgrade to Joe's House of Insurance. It's because it is expensive. And I do not envy carriers for having, especially the small carriers that are already operating on pretty thin margins right now. I do not envy them having to pay those high insurance rates.
Mary O'Connell dropping nuggets of wisdom for us here on this Tuesday morning. Thank you for joining us here. And of course, we've got Check Call coming up this afternoon, right?
Of course, 12:30, we're going to get into the insurance world. We're going to break down some things that brokers need to look out for, maybe some best practices to start implementing into your business. And then, maybe something that could potentially help you fight some fraud or some insurance fraud or anything like that. So it's definitely a really fun episode, and I highly recommend checking it out.
Awesome, Mary. Always insightful. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. I'm looking forward to that episode.
Thanks, guys.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with our next look at the weather in just a few minutes.